Nobody talks about $50,000. Financial advice jumps from getting out of debt to building a six-figure portfolio. Books are written about your first million. Podcasts obsess over passive income streams and financial independence. But the space between $0 and $100,000, that quiet, unglamorous middle ground, is where most people's wealth journeys either take root or quietly die. And right in the center of that space sits a number that changes everything. $50,000. Not because of what it buys you, because of what it does to your money when you are not looking. This is the secret phase of wealth. The phase nobody celebrates. The phase that looks exactly like failure from the outside. And the phase that separates the people who eventually build real financial security from the people who spend decades trying and never quite get there. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why $50,000 is the most important financial milestone most people never hear about. What happens to money differently above this threshold, and the specific behaviors that get you there faster than almost anything else. Let us start with what nobody tells you about building wealth. It is not linear. It does not reward effort consistently. It does not feel like progress for a very long time. And then, almost without warning, it begins to accelerate on its own. Albert Einstein is often credited with calling compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether or not he said it, the mathematics are undeniable. Compound interest is the process by which your returns generate their own returns, which then generate more returns, which then generate more. It is interest on interest on interest, accumulating in an exponential curve that starts almost invisibly flat and then bends sharply upward at a point most people never reach because they give up before they get there. At $10,000 invested at an 8% annual return, your money earns you $800 in the first year. That feels meaningful. You started with $10,000 and now you have $10,800. But it still feels like you did most of the work. You saved the $10,000. The market barely contributed. At $25,000 at the same return, you earned $2,000 in a year. Still feels like your contributions are doing the heavy lifting. Still feels like you are pushing the boulder uphill. But at $50,000 at 8%, something shifts. You earn $4,000 in a single year without doing anything, without showing up, without trading time for money. For $1,000 that arrives because money you already saved is working for you in your sleep. That is roughly $11 a day, every day, generated entirely by capital you accumulated in the past. That shift, from feeling like you are building wealth to feeling like wealth is building itself, is the psychological milestone that changes everything. And it happens in a way that is deeply personal and deeply motivating in a way that no chart or projection can fully prepare you for. Morgan Housel, the author of The Psychology of Money, has written extensively about why the behavior around money matters more than the knowledge of money. His core insight is that personal finance is more personal than it is finance. Most people know they should save more and spend less. The gap is not information. The gap is psychology. And the $50,000 threshold is one of the most powerful psychological events in an investor's journey because it is the first moment where the math of compounding becomes viscerally real rather than abstractly understood. Before $50,000, most people experience wealth building as sacrifice. You are deferring spending today for a future that feels distant and theoretical. You are watching your account balance grow slowly while your peers seem to be enjoying the money you are choosing not to spend. The psychological cost is high and the visible reward is low. This is where most people quietly stop. After $50,000, the experience begins to shift. The investment returns start to feel like a second income. A small one at first, but a real one. One that does not require your labor. One that grows automatically. And that experience of money making money without your involvement rewires how you think about saving, spending, and time itself. This is what behavioral economists call a reference point shift. Your financial identity changes. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to build wealth and start thinking of yourself as someone who has wealth that is growing. And that identity shift changes your decisions in ways that compound over time just as powerfully as the interest itself. Now here is where the $50,000 rule gets even more interesting. Because the journey to $50,000 teaches you something that no investment course, no financial book, and no amount of market knowledge can teach you. It teaches you your own financial character. Everyone believes they are a disciplined investor until markets drop 30% and their balance falls from $45,000 to $31,000 in 3 weeks. Everyone believes they will stay the course until staying the course means watching 20 years of progress apparently evaporate on a screen. The investors who make it to $50,000 and keep their capital there through a meaningful market correction are the investors who have genuinely tested their own psychology. They have experienced real loss on paper. They have felt the pull to sell everything and wait for it to recover. And they chose not to. That experience is not just educational. It is transformational. Warren Buffett has spoken repeatedly about the importance of temperament over intelligence in investing. His argument is not that smart people fail at investing. His argument is that emotionally reactive people fail at investing regardless of how smart they are. The $50,000 milestone is the first real test of temperament for most investors. It is the first time the numbers are large enough to produce genuine fear. And passing that test changes you in ways that make every subsequent financial decision easier and better. So how do you get there? What actually accelerates the journey to $50,000 in a way that most financial advice misses? 3 things. First, automate before you feel it. The single most powerful accelerant to reaching $50,000 is removing the decision to save from the equation entirely. Every dollar that passes through your hands is a dollar that your spending psychology has an opportunity to claim. Automated transfers to investment accounts on the day you get paid, before you see the money, before you make any spending decisions, before lifestyle has any chance to absorb it. Eliminate the willpower requirement entirely. You do not need discipline if you never face the temptation. Set the automation. Forget the money exists. Let it accumulate. Second, protect the milestone more than you chase the next one. One of the most common and most costly mistakes investors make near the $50,000 threshold is taking on risk they do not understand in an effort to accelerate the timeline. When your balance approaches $40,000 or $45,000, the temptation to reach for a higher return vehicle, an individual stock tip, a leveraged product.
The milestone is worth protecting. Get there with steady, boring, index-based investing. The aggressive strategies can come later when you have a larger base that can absorb a mistake without derailing your entire timeline. Third, understand the difference between net worth and liquid invested assets. A car worth $20,000 and $15,000 in savings is not a $35,000 path to the $50,000 milestone. Depreciating assets are not wealth. The $50,000 rule specifically refers to liquid invested assets, money in brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, index funds, or other growth-oriented vehicles, not the total of everything you own. This distinction matters because people who count their car and their furniture toward their net worth often feel like they are progressing when their actual invested asset base is barely moving. Track the right number, the number that compounds. Once you cross $50,000, something subtle but profound happens to your relationship with financial risk. Studies in behavioral finance, including foundational work by Shlomo Benartzi and Richard Thaler on how people perceive financial gains and losses, show that investors with larger asset bases make measurably better long-term decisions. Not because they are smarter, because the psychological weight of each individual decision becomes smaller relative to the total. A 5% market drop on $10,000 costs you $500, which feels catastrophic at that scale. A 5% market drop on $50,000 costs you $2,500, which feels significant, but your mind registers it differently when the base is larger and the long-term trajectory is already established. This is why the first $50,000 is the hardest $50,000 you will ever save. Not because the math is harder, because the psychology is hardest at the beginning, when the numbers are smallest, the progress is slowest, and the lifestyle sacrifices are most visible. Every subsequent $50,000 will come faster. The second will come faster than the first. The third will come faster than the second. Not because your income grew dramatically, though that helps, but because the base is larger, the returns are larger, and your financial identity has fundamentally shifted. The people who never reach the $50,000 milestone are not unlucky. They are not unintelligent. They are people who underestimated the psychological difficulty of the early phase and gave up before the math started working in their favor. They stopped contributing during a market correction. They drained the account for a large purchase. They shifted the money into something speculative that did not deliver. They let lifestyle inflation absorb the contributions that would have carried them across the threshold. The people who do reach it and stay there describe the experience in strikingly similar terms. They say it changed how they think about money. They say it made them less anxious. They say it made them more patient. They say it made everything that came after feel more possible. Nobody talks about $50,000. Financial advice skips right past it on the way to bigger numbers. But the investors who actually study wealth, who trace back the decisions that led to long-term financial security, almost always identify this quiet, unglamorous phase as the turning point. The moment the math started working for them instead of against them. The moment wealth stopped being a goal and started being a process. The moment everything changed without anyone around them even noticing. That moment is available to you. It does not require a high income. It does not require a perfect market. It requires patience, automation, and the willingness to stay the course through the phase that feels the most like nothing is happening. Because nothing happening on the surface is exactly what compounding looks like before it bends.